The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the familiar mixture of translated languages, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that had become the background music of interstellar diplomacy. Ambassador Zix Thara of the Hegemony adjusted her crystalline breathing apparatus and glanced at the holographic display showing the latest petition from the third planet of the Sol system. Earth, she said the word like it tasted bitter in her vocal sacs. They're requesting membership again. Counselor Vrektar, a towering insectoid from the Hive Collective, clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among his species. The stubborn little mammals never learn, do they? How many times have we rejected their application now? 17, replied Minister Quoll from behind his environmental suit's faceplate. His aquatic species required a constant mist of methane-rich atmosphere to survive in the council chambers, each time with increasingly desperate pleas about their planet being seriously hazardous to visiting species. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as intergalactic laughter. Various species expressed their mirth through bioluminescent flashes, harmonic frequencies, and electromagnetic pulses. Even the normally stoic silicon-based delegates from Kepler 442b allowed their crystalline forms to vibrate with amusement. Ambassador Zix Thara raised one of her forearms to restore order. Fellow representatives, while their persistence is entertaining, we must address this matter formally. The humans have submitted extensive documentation about their world's environmental hazards. Should we review their claims once more? Oh, please do, wheezed Counselor Rektar, his breathing spiracles fluttering with continued mirth. I could use another good laugh. What was their latest excuse? Atmospheric toxicity? Gravitational anomalies? Temporal distortions? The holographic display shifted to show Earth's submission documents. Pages upon pages of warnings scrolled past, each more ridiculous than the last in the eyes of the assembled delegates. Warning: planetary surface subject to violent atmospheric disturbances, read Zixathera aloud. These storms can produce electrical discharges exceeding 30,000 amperes and wind velocities surpassing 200 kilometers per hour. Quoll's aquatic laughter created bubbles in his suit. 30,000 amperes? My homeworld's daily electrical storms generate more energy than that just from plankton movement and wind at 200 kilometers per hour. On Theta Centauri, a gentle breeze moves at 400 kilometers per hour. There's more, Zixthera continued, clearly enjoying the absurdity. Warning: planetary surface experiences extreme temperature variations ranging from -89 degrees Celsius to positive 58 degrees Celsius. The chamber's environmental systems actually registered the delegates' collective amusement as several species began generating heat from their laughter. Vrektar's compound eyes glittered. My species thrives in temperatures that would instantly vaporize their entire atmosphere. Do they think we're made of some delicate organic material? Perhaps the most amusing warning, Zixthera said, scrolling to another section. Warning: planet inhabited by 7.8 billion sentient beings engaged in territorial disputes, resource conflicts, and ideological warfare. The laughter died down slightly as some delegates considered this. Minister Quoll's tentacles waved dismissively. Territorial disputes? We've seen worse on nursery worlds. The young ones on Aquarius Prime have more sophisticated conflict resolution than these humans describe. What's truly pathetic, added Counselor Vrektar, is that they seem proud of these supposed dangers, as if having a mildly active atmosphere and some social disagreements makes their world some kind of fortress of terror. Ambassador Zixthera pulled up Earth's galactic positioning data. Let's see. Sol 3, as they call it, sits in what they term the Goldilocks zone of their star system. Perfect orbital distance, stable rotation, magnetic field protection from cosmic radiation. It's practically a vacation resort by galactic standards. The magnetic field protection is particularly amusing, chimed in Delegate Xenophia from the Plasma Collective, her energy form flickering between colors. They act like solar radiation is dangerous. My people are literally made of ionized particles that would burn through their deadly magnetic field like tissue paper. The Assembly reviewed more of Earth's warnings with increasing amusement. Claims about deadly ultraviolet radiation that required protective measures, toxic atmospheric compositions that could harm visitors, and extreme geological activity that might endanger spacecraft. Look at this. Zixthara highlighted another section. They warn about something called earthquakes that can reach 9.0 on what they call the Richter scale. They describe these as catastrophic events capable of leveling cities. 9.0 Richter? Vrektar's mandibles clicked rapidly in the insectoid equivalent of hysterical laughter. The tectonic adjustments we use for landscaping on Kepler 186f register at 15.0 on their primitive scale. We literally reshape continents as a form of artistic expression. Minister Quall accessed his species' geological databases. Our younglings play in seismic zones that would register beyond their measurement capabilities. They think ground movement is dangerous? We surf tectonic waves for recreation. The mood in the chamber grew increasingly jovial as delegates shared stories of their own world's actual dangers. Xenophia described plasma storms that could disintegrate matter at the atomic level. Rektar detailed hive worlds where the atmospheric pressure could crush diamonds. Quall reminisced about methane tsunamis that engulfed entire continents on his homeworld. Perhaps, suggested Delegate Thor Magnum from the Silicon Confederation, his crystalline voice resonating through the chamber's acoustic systems, we should visit this dangerous world ourselves. If it's truly as hazardous as they claim, it might serve as an interesting research opportunity. The suggestion was met with more laughter. A research opportunity? Zixthara's vocal sacs vibrated with amusement. The only research value would be studying how a species could evolve to be so delusional about their environment's actual threat level. I volunteer for this expedition, announced Rektar, standing to his full 3-meter height. My combat exoskeleton is designed for surviving in the cores of dying stars. Whatever these humans consider seriously hazardous should provide adequate entertainment value. Minister Quall's tentacles waved enthusiastically. Count the Aquatic Union in as well. Our environmental suits are rated for the deepest ocean trenches and the vacuum of space simultaneously. These human warnings sound like a delightful vacation opportunity. The proposal quickly gained traction throughout the chamber. Delegates from dozens of species began volunteering for what they increasingly viewed as a comedy expedition to the galaxy's most overprotective species. Very well, Zixthara announced formally. Let the record show that the Galactic Council has approved an exploratory mission to Sol 3, designated Earth by its inhabitants. The purpose? To evaluate their membership application by directly assessing their claims of planetary hazards. She paused for dramatic effect. Given the laughably exaggerated nature of their warnings, this should serve as an excellent team-building exercise for our junior diplomatic staff. The chamber erupted in approving sounds from across the species spectrum. Several delegates were already making vacation plans, treating the upcoming mission as a diplomatic holiday to the galaxy's most anxiety-ridden world. I propose we make this a teaching moment, suggested Counselor Vrektar. We'll bring our most promising young diplomats to show them how some species can develop irrational fear responses to perfectly normal environmental conditions. Xenophia's plasma form brightened with enthusiasm. Excellent idea. My apprentice energy shapers could use exposure to a low-stimulation environment. This Earth sounds perfectly suited for their first off-world experience. As the council session concluded, delegates filled out expedition rosters with an air of anticipation typically reserved for attending cultural festivals or scientific exhibitions. None bothered to read the fine print of Earth's warnings, dismissing them as the paranoid ramblings of an evolutionarily timid species. The expedition ships began assembling within the week. Massive vessels designed to survive in the hearts of gas giants and navigate through asteroid fields with magnetic cores that could disrupt entire solar systems. The fleet represented the pinnacle of galactic engineering, with hulls that could withstand the pressure of neutron stars and life support systems capable of sustaining 1,000 different species simultaneously. Ambassador Zixathara stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as the final preparations were completed. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see dozens of species loading equipment that could terraform dead worlds or harvest energy from black holes. "Are you sure we need this much equipment for a vacation world?" asked her aide, a young crystalline apprentice named Shardtel. Zixthara's 4 eyes gleamed with anticipated amusement. "Better to be over-prepared when visiting the galaxy's most dangerous world," she replied, her vocal sacs quivering with suppressed laughter. "We wouldn't want to disappoint our hosts by not taking their warnings seriously." The fleet set course for Sol system, their faster-than-light drives engaging with the casual efficiency of technologies that routinely crossed galactic distances in mere days. Behind them, the Galactic Council's databases updated to reflect the mission's purpose. Diplomatic fact-finding expedition to assess membership application of SOL-3 inhabitants, with emphasis on evaluating claimed environmental hazards. In the mission notes, someone had added, "Expected difficulty level, minimal. Recommended for junior staff training and recreational purposes." The expedition that departed that day carried representatives from 47 different species, each armed with technology that could survive in environments that would instantly annihilate most known forms of matter. They were heading to what they believed was the galaxy's safest, most overly cautious world. None of them had bothered to investigate what humans actually meant when they labeled something as seriously hazardous. The journey to Earth would take 6 standard galactic days. The delegates spent their time preparing presentations on proper threat assessment and planning educational materials about realistic environmental dangers. They scheduled recreational activities for what they expected to be a thoroughly relaxing diplomatic mission. As their ships crossed into the Sol system's outer boundaries, automatic sensors began scanning the third planet. Initial readings confirmed their expectations: stable orbit, magnetic field protection, atmospheric composition within acceptable parameters for carbon-based life. "Just as we suspected," Zixthara announced to the assembled delegates. "Perfect vacation world conditions. Whatever these humans call dangerous, it should provide excellent entertainment value." The fleet approached Earth with all the caution typically reserved for visiting a peaceful research station. The first sign that something was wrong came when Counselor Vrektar's environmental sensors started screaming warnings as their fleet entered Earth's upper atmosphere. His mandibles clicked nervously as readings flooded his consciousness through his neural interface. "This can't be right," he muttered, his usually confident demeanor wavering. "The atmospheric analysis is showing impossibly aggressive chemical compositions." Ambassador Zixathara moved to review his readings, her 4 arms working frantically across holographic displays. "What do you mean?" "The preliminary scans showed standard nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, perfectly harmless." "That's what I thought too." Vrektar's compound eyes dilated as more data streamed in. "But look at these trace elements. The atmosphere contains free oxygen at 21% concentration." A hush fell over the bridge as delegates from across the species spectrum processed this information. Minister Quall's aquatic form actually paled within his environmental suit. "Free oxygen?" Quall's voice came out as barely a whisper. "As in, molecular oxygen just floating unbound in the atmosphere?" "Impossible," declared Xenophia, her plasma form flickering with distress. Free oxygen is one of the most reactive substances in the universe. It would immediately bond with available materials or spontaneously combust. No atmosphere could maintain that concentration without constant volcanic activity or... She trailed off as the implications hit her. Shardtell, Zixthera's young assistant, was rapidly accessing galactic chemical databases through her crystalline matrix form. Ambassador? Shardtell's harmonic voice carried undertones of growing concern. Free oxygen at those concentrations would create an environment where even slight energy discharges could trigger massive combustion events. Any species breathing that atmosphere would essentially be living inside a fuel-air explosive. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Delegate Thor Magnum's crystalline form resonated with what could only be described as fear. "Are you telling me?" Thor Magnum's voice carried the grinding sound of stressed silicon. "That this entire planet is essentially a giant bomb waiting for an ignition source?" Before anyone could answer, their sensors detected something that made the free oxygen discovery seem quaint by comparison. The communications officer, a multi-limbed synthetic from the Machine Collective, announced in a voice devoid of emotion, "Fleet Command, we're detecting massive electrical discharges in the planet's atmosphere. Magnitude readings are unprecedented." "How unprecedented?" Zixthera demanded. "Individual lightning strikes are measuring up to 300 million volts, with current flows exceeding 30,000 amperes, exactly as the human warning specified. But that's not the concerning part." "What could be more concerning than 300 million volt electrical discharges in a combustible atmosphere?" Minister Quall asked, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. "The fact that there are approximately 8.6 million of these discharges occurring every day across the planet's surface. The humans aren't just living with occasional electrical storms. They're existing in a continuous planetary-wide electrical bombardment zone." The viewing screen automatically filtered the visual input to prevent retinal damage as they observed Earth's day-night terminator. Lightning storms lit up entire continents, creating cascading chains of electrical activity that arced between cloud formations stretching for thousands of kilometers. "By the void," whispered Rektar, his exoskeleton actually trembling. "My homeworld's electrical storms were nothing compared to this. We're looking at a planet where the atmospheric conditions could instantly vaporize our ship's hull if we drop below the ionosphere." Worse discoveries followed in rapid succession. Long-range scanners revealed what humans called hurricanes, atmospheric disturbances that generated sustained wind speeds exceeding 250 kilometers per hour while spanning areas larger than many delegate homeworlds. The storms moved across the planet's surface with the destructive force of planetary bombardment weapons. "These aren't weather patterns," announced the fleet's meteorologist, a gas giant native whose species had evolved specifically to understand atmospheric dynamics. "These are atmospheric wars. The entire planet is engaged in continuous meteorological combat." Xenophia's plasma form actually dimmed with shock as she processed the data. "The energy release from a single one of these hurricane systems exceeds the total power output of most stellar civilizations. How is anything still alive down there?" The answer came when they detected the seismic activity. Earth's surface wasn't just tectonically active, it was in constant violent motion. Earthquake sensors registered thousands of tremors daily, with major seismic events regularly exceeding the scales that their instruments were designed to measure. "The humans weren't exaggerating," Shardtell reported, her crystalline matrix actually developing stress fractures from processing the overwhelming data. "Their Richter scale readings of 9.0 translate to seismic forces that would shatter the reinforced foundations of our council chambers." Minister Quall's environmental suit started cycling emergency protocols as his aquatic physiology responded to stress. "We build our cities on tectonically stable platforms specifically because seismic activity above 2.0 Richter can cause structural damage. They're casually living with daily 6.0 and 7.0 events?" It gets worse, announced the Geological Survey team. The planet's magnetic field isn't just protective, it's actively weaponized. Solar radiation that penetrates the magnetosphere gets concentrated and redirected into aurora displays that generate enough electromagnetic interference to disrupt most known communication systems. Thor Magnum's crystalline form resonated with the harmonic frequency of shattered expectations. Aurora displays? Those aren't decorative light shows, those are electromagnetic warfare demonstrations. The humans are living under a planetary defense grid that could scramble our neural interfaces. As if summoned by their growing horror, Earth's radio communications began reaching the fleet. The delegates listened in stunned silence as human voices casually discussed conditions that would represent apocalyptic scenarios for any civilized species. Hurricane Zeta is expected to make landfall with Category 4 intensity, announced a human weather broadcaster with the calm professionalism of someone discussing lunch plans. Residents in evacuation zones should prepare for sustained winds of 150 miles per hour, storm surge up to 13 feet, and isolated tornadoes. Tornadoes? Rektar's translation software struggled with the concept. What are tornadoes? The answer came from their atmospheric analysis computers. Rotating columns of air reaching wind speeds of over 500 kilometers per hour, capable of generating enough rotational force to lift and relocate structures massing several tons. They have weaponized atmospheric rotation, Quall stated in disbelief. The humans are living in an environment where the air itself can spontaneously form into kinetic bombardment weapons. But the true horror began revealing itself when they intercepted human news broadcasts. Not only were humans aware of their planet's devastating environmental conditions, they were thriving in them. "Good morning. This is Colorado Mountain Rescue," came another casual human voice. "Today's avalanche danger is rated high above 10,000 feet due to recent snowfall and wind loading. Climbers should exercise extreme caution in backcountry areas." Avalanche? Chardtel's stress fractures spread deeper through her crystalline matrix. They're voluntarily entering zones where massive kinetic debris flows occur? The fleet's xenobiologist, a collective consciousness from the hive mind, provided analysis that chilled every delegate present. Based on intercepted communications, humans regularly engage in recreational activities in environments that would instantly kill most galactic species. They deliberately expose themselves to solar radiation for leisure, voluntarily enter seismic zones for tourism, and participate in sporting events during active electrical storms. "That's impossible." Zixthera's vocal sacs were constricting with stress. No sentient species could evolve to consider lethal environmental conditions as entertainment. Furthermore, the xenobiologist continued, their urban centers are specifically built in the most dangerous zones. Major population centers are located on active seismic fault lines, in hurricane-prone coastal regions, and in areas experiencing the highest electrical storm activity. The communication systems crackled to life with an incoming transmission from Earth. The voice that emerged was distinctly human, speaking in the measured tones of professional diplomacy. "Galactic Council Fleet, this is Earth Diplomatic Command. We've been monitoring your approach and wanted to offer a formal welcome. We notice your vessels are maintaining high orbital positions. Just wanted to remind you that our planet's environmental conditions require special precautions for visiting species." Ambassador Zixthara found her voice after several attempts. "Earth Diplomatic Command, we're reviewing your environmental warnings. Could you clarify the atmospheric oxygen concentrations?" "Certainly," the human voice replied with what sounded like amusement. "Standard atmospheric composition at sea level is approximately 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, with trace gases. We recommend that visiting species verify their atmospheric processing systems are rated for high oxidation environments." "High oxidation environments," Minister Quall repeated weakly. "They're casually describing atmospheric conditions that would instantly combust most known organic materials." Additionally, the human continued, we're currently in hurricane season, so several coastal regions are experiencing elevated meteorological activity. Current storm systems are tracking Category 3 and 4 intensity. We can provide updated meteorological data if your vessels need to plan approach vectors that avoid active electrical storm zones. Counselor Vrektar's compound eyes were now showing stress patterns that his species usually reserved for combat situations. They're offering to help us navigate around environmental conditions that could destroy our entire fleet. Earth Diplomatic Command, Zixthera managed to respond. Could you clarify what constitutes normal seismic activity levels in your major population centers? There was a pause before the human replied, and when he did, delegates could swear they heard barely suppressed laughter in his voice. Well, we generally don't consider it newsworthy unless we're looking at magnitude 5.0 or higher on the Richter scale. Anything below that is pretty much daily background activity. Los Angeles, for instance, experiences several thousand minor tremors annually. We only really pay attention when things get interesting. When things get interesting? Shardtell's voice cracked with harmonics of disbelief. What do humans consider interesting seismic activity? Oh, magnitude 7.0 and above tends to make the evening news. The 1994 Northridge earthquake was a 6.7, and that was considered significant but manageable. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake was estimated at 7.9, and that was properly exciting. The fleet's seismic monitoring equipment had been screaming warnings since they entered Earth's gravity well, detecting what their instruments classified as continuous planetary bombardment level tectonic activity. The humans were describing these conditions as background activity. We appreciate your patience with our environmental briefings, the human voice continued. We know some species find our planetary conditions a bit intense. Would your fleet prefer to maintain current orbital distance, or would you like us to identify landing zones with relatively calm conditions? The word relatively sent waves of terror through species that had never before experienced true fear of a planetary environment. What constitutes calm conditions? Thor Magnum asked, his crystalline form now generating stress harmonics that threatened to shatter viewing screens. Well, we could arrange for landing sites in tectonically stable regions with minimal electrical storm activity and moderate weather patterns. Somewhere with average wind speeds below 50 kilometers per hour, no active volcanic systems, and low probability of major seismic events in the next 72 hours. Every delegate present processed the same horrifying realization simultaneously. The humans were describing their planet's calm conditions as environments that would still register as catastrophically dangerous by galactic standards. Earth Diplomatic Command, Zixthera said slowly, what do humans consider to be seriously hazardous environmental conditions? The pause that followed seemed to last forever. When the human finally responded, his voice carried a tone that delegates across the fleet would later describe as genuinely concerned. Counselor, are you asking about our hazard classification systems? Because if your species aren't adapted for high oxygen atmospheres with active electrical and seismic activity, you should probably be aware that our seriously hazardous classifications include things like active volcanic eruptions, Category 5 hurricane systems, magnitude 8.0 plus earthquakes, and radiation zones. Radiation zones, Minister Quall whispered. Some of our industrial areas and former weapons testing sites have elevated radiation levels that could be harmful to certain species. Nothing that would concern humans with proper protective equipment, but we want to make sure visiting delegates don't accidentally wander into areas where the background radiation might cause genetic damage to species not adapted for it. The fleet hung in high orbit, their most advanced environmental systems screaming warnings about a planet that its inhabitants had just casually described as a bit intense. The humans weren't just living on a world that would kill most galactic species instantly. They were thriving in it, building cities in its most dangerous zones, and treating its devastating environmental conditions as mild inconveniences, requiring nothing more than proper protective equipment. And they had been trying to warn the galaxy about this for years. The emergency council session aboard the flagship lasted 18 hours. Representatives from 47 species huddled in their environmental suits, many of which were now running backup life support systems due to the stress their occupants were experiencing. Ambassador Zixthara stood before the assembled delegates, her 4 arms trembling as she held the updated threat assessment reports. The holographic displays around the chamber showed data that fundamentally challenged everything they thought they knew about habitable worlds and the species that could survive on them. "Fellow delegates," she began, her vocal sacs barely managing to produce sound, "I must formally revise our mission parameters. This is no longer a diplomatic expedition to evaluate an overly cautious species. We are currently in orbit around what may be the most lethal inhabited world in known space." Counselor Vrektar, his usually proud insectoid posture now hunched with exhaustion, raised one mandible. "The question before us isn't whether Earth meets the criteria for dangerous world classification. The question is whether our instruments are even capable of measuring the full extent of the hazards we're observing." The fleet's chief xenobiologist, speaking through the collective consciousness interface, provided updates that sent waves of disbelief through the chamber. Analysis of human biological samples obtained from their communication signals reveals physiological adaptations that suggest evolution in an environment we previously thought impossible for complex life. "Explain," demanded Minister Quall, his aquatic form now a pale blue-green within his environmental suit. "Humans possess cardiovascular systems capable of surviving in atmospheric pressure variations from sea level to altitudes exceeding 400 meters above sea level. Their cardiac adaptations include redundant arterial pathways and enhanced oxygen-binding proteins. In essence, they've evolved to function in atmospheric conditions that range from standard to what we would classify as high-altitude emergency scenarios." Delegate Xenophia's plasma form flickered weakly. "But that's just altitude adaptation. Many species can handle pressure variations." "That's not all," the xenobiologist continued. "Their muscular and skeletal systems show adaptations for surviving kinetic impacts that would prove fatal to most galactic species. Human bone density and muscle fiber composition suggest they've evolved to withstand forces consistent with frequent falls, collisions, and exposure to high-acceleration events." Shardtel, despite the spreading stress fractures in her crystalline matrix, was analyzing the implications. "Are you suggesting humans evolved specifically to survive their planet's environmental hazards?" "I'm suggesting something far more disturbing. Humans didn't just evolve to survive these conditions. They evolved to thrive in them. Their neurological systems show adaptations for processing multiple simultaneous threat assessments while maintaining cognitive function. They can literally think clearly while their environment is actively trying to kill them." Thor Magnum resonated with a frequency that expressed profound unease. "We need to reconsider what we know about human technology. If they've developed civilization while constantly battling these environmental conditions, their technological development must be—" He paused as the implications hit him. Their technology wasn't developed in safe laboratory conditions. Human engineering had evolved specifically to function in environments that would destroy most galactic civilizations. The communication system activated again, bringing another casual human voice into their increasingly horrified assembly. "Galactic Fleet, this is Houston Weather Service. We wanted to give you an updated meteorological briefing. We've got Hurricane Delta tracking toward the Gulf Coast, currently maintaining Category 4 intensity with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. Additionally, there's a severe thunderstorm watch in effect across the Midwest, with supercell development possible." Ambassador Zixithara found herself asking a question she never thought she'd need to ask. Houston Weather Service. How do human populations respond to Category 4 hurricane systems? Standard protocol, Ambassador: coastal evacuation for storm surge zones, building shutdowns for non-essential personnel, emergency services on standby. Most inland infrastructure should weather it fine. We might see some power outages and minor flooding, but nothing our recovery systems can't handle. Recovery systems? Rektar's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they created a continuous buzzing sound. You have systems specifically designed to recover from environmental attacks that would devastate our homeworlds? Well, sure. The human sounded almost confused by the question. Hurricane season is June through November every year. We'd be in pretty rough shape if we didn't have robust recovery infrastructure. Plus, we get tornado seasons, earthquake zones, wildfire seasons, blizzard systems, and flood zones depending on geographic region. Minister Quall was reviewing the data with growing horror. They're describing annual cyclical environmental warfare as routine maintenance issues. The human continued, seemingly unaware of the panic he was causing among the galactic delegates. If your fleet needs specific environmental data for landing zone selection, we can provide real-time updates on seismic activity, atmospheric electrical discharge probability, wind shear analysis, and radiation monitoring. Radiation monitoring? Xenophia's plasma form actually dimmed to barely visible levels. Standard background radiation varies by geographic region due to natural uranium deposits, granite formations, and solar interaction with our magnetosphere. Nothing hazardous to humans, but we know some species are more sensitive to electromagnetic spectrum variations. The fleet's radiation specialist, a silicon-based entity from the Kepler system, was frantically recalibrating their instruments. Ambassador, the background radiation levels they're describing as standard would require Level 3 protective protocols for my species. They're living in what we would classify as a mild radiation field. That's not possible, Zixathera replied weakly. Complex organic life can't evolve in radiation fields. Apparently it can, the radiation specialist responded. Moreover, analysis of their urban center locations shows they've deliberately built major population centers in areas with elevated background radiation due to natural geological formations. The xenobiologists' collective voice added another disturbing layer to their understanding. Further analysis suggests humans have developed resistance to radiation exposure that would prove lethal to most carbon-based life forms. Their cellular repair mechanisms show adaptations consistent with regular exposure to mutagenic environmental factors. A new voice joined the communication from Earth, identified as representing something called the International Space Station. Galactic Fleet, this is ISS Command. We noticed your orbital position and wanted to offer navigational assistance. Are your ships rated for debris field navigation? Our orbital space contains approximately 34,000 tracked objects larger than 10 centimeters, with an estimated 900,000 objects between 1 and 10 centimeters. Debris field? Thor Magnum's crystalline form was now generating harmonics of pure terror. Their orbital space is a debris field? Just space junk from decades of space operations, the ISS voice replied casually. Orbital velocities make even small fragments potentially hazardous to navigation. We can provide updated tracking data if you need to plot safe approach vectors. Counselor Vrektar was accessing his species' space navigation databases. 34,000 objects? We classify any orbital space with more than 100 trackable debris objects as a navigational hazard zone requiring specialized clearance permits. The humans aren't just living on a death world, Chardtel realized. Her stress fractures now visible as bright lines across her crystalline surface. They've turned their orbital space into a debris minefield. But the most disturbing revelation came when they analyzed human entertainment and recreational activities. The fleet's cultural anthropologist, a collective entity from the hive minds, provided analysis that left the assembled delegates speechless. Humans engage in recreational activities that involve deliberately exposing themselves to environmental conditions that would constitute torture by galactic standards. They climb mountains where atmospheric pressure and temperature would kill most species. They surf in ocean conditions that would destroy our naval vessels. They ski down inclined surfaces at velocities exceeding 100 kilometers per hour for entertainment. Entertainment! Minister Quoll's tentacles had gone completely limp with shock. Furthermore, they have developed competitive sporting events based on surviving environmental hazards. They race vehicles across desert terrain where temperatures exceed lethal limits for most species. They compete in events that require traversing obstacles specifically designed to inflict maximum physical stress. Xenophia flickered with barely contained hysteria. Are you telling me that humans deliberately create additional environmental hazards for recreational purposes? Yes. Moreover, they consider these activities relaxing. Analysis of human neural chemistry during these activities shows patterns consistent with stress relief and pleasure responses. The communication from Earth continued with what sounded like genuine helpfulness. Fleet Command, we're getting some interesting readings from your ship's electromagnetic signatures. Are your life support systems functioning normally? We're registering what looks like elevated stress indicators across multiple vessel types. Ambassador Zixathera managed a response that came out as barely a whisper. Earth Command, our life support systems are functioning within normal parameters. We're experiencing some crew fatigue from extended observation duties. Copy that, Ambassador. Extended observation of what, exactly? Our planet's looking pretty normal from our perspective. Are your instruments detecting something we should be concerned about? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. The most advanced galactic civilization in known space, equipped with technology that could survive in the cores of dying stars, was asking humans if they should be concerned about environmental conditions that humans considered pretty normal. Earth Command, Zixathera finally asked, what would humans consider to be a genuinely dangerous planetary environment? The pause that followed was longer this time, and when the human responded, his voice carried a tone of genuine scientific interest. Well, that's an interesting question, Ambassador. I suppose we'd be concerned about environments with atmospheric compositions that would cause immediate physiological damage, extreme temperature variations beyond our equipment tolerances, or radiation levels that would overwhelm our protective systems. Could you provide specific parameters? Thor Magnum asked, his crystalline form resonating with desperate hope that maybe, possibly, humans had some concept of genuine environmental danger. Sure. We'd probably avoid planets with atmospheric pressures above 5 Earth atmospheres or below 0.1 atmospheres. Temperature ranges outside -40 to +70 Celsius would require specialized equipment. Radiation levels above 1,000 times Earth background would need significant shielding. Every delegate performed rapid calculations using their species' environmental tolerance databases. The results were uniformly terrifying. Ambassador, Shardtel's voice came out as barely a harmonic whisper. Humans just described as dangerous environmental conditions that are within acceptable parameters for recreational activities on most of our homeworlds. There's more, the human voice continued. We'd be concerned about seismic activity above magnitude 9.0 on a regular basis, or atmospheric electrical activity that exceeded our lightning rod and surge protection capabilities. Rektar performed one final calculation that broke his remaining composure entirely. They just defined as dangerous seismic conditions that are below the threshold we use for continental construction projects. The horrifying truth crystallized in the minds of every delegate present. Humans hadn't been exaggerating their planet's environmental hazards. They had been understating them. What they described as seriously hazardous conditions were environmental parameters that would instantly annihilate most galactic species. And humans had evolved to consider these conditions so normal that they built their recreational activities around creating additional environmental stress for entertainment. Earth Command, Ambassador Zix Thera said, her voice carrying the weight of complete civilizational humility. The Galactic Council would like to formally approve Earth's membership application. Outstanding! The human voice brightened considerably. We're excited to begin participating in galactic civilization. When would you like to schedule the formal diplomatic exchanges? Zix Thera looked around the chamber at delegates who were universally indicating that they never wanted to leave the safety of their ships. We'll be in touch, Earth Command. The Galactic Council needs to review some protocols first. No problem, Ambassador. Take all the time you need. We'll be here. Just try to avoid the orbital debris field on your way out. The fleet departed Earth's orbit with a velocity that approached the maximum safe parameters for their faster-than-light drives. Behind them, they left a species that had casually described surviving in environmental conditions that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. In the months that followed, Earth's membership application was not only approved but fast-tracked through every diplomatic channel. No galactic species wanted to risk being on the wrong side of a civilization that considered planetary-scale environmental warfare to be background noise. The humans, for their part, seemed genuinely pleased to join galactic society. They brought with them technologies developed in environmental conditions that made their equipment incredibly robust by galactic standards. Human-engineered systems quickly became the gold standard for any application requiring extreme durability. But perhaps most importantly, they brought a perspective that fundamentally changed how the galaxy thought about the phrase, seriously hazardous. Because if humans described something as seriously hazardous, the rest of the galaxy had learned to take those warnings very, very seriously indeed.